It's a design principle of EvoControl that multiple zones can be changed simultaneously in many different places in the application. Here I'm in the setpoint editor where I see the current setup for my system, and I can, if I want to, address all of the zones at the same time with these two buttons at the bottom. I still retain the possibility to individually tweak this again if I want to, but being able to do so at the same time can be very useful. EvoControl supports the paradigm of scenes or activities, and the idea is that you can change a number of zones simultaneously according to an activity that you're going to do, like watch TV, or you're going to study, or you're going to take a shower. And when you do that, you activate the activity in question, and then the set points that you have chosen for the particular activity will be implemented across those zones. Let's take a look here at the good night activity which I've created for myself. I've decided that I want the living room to drop by 2 degrees from whatever it's currently set to. And for the upstairs rooms, I'd like to have these particular fixed temperatures set. So activating the good night activity would simply implement this in my system, and the zones that don't participate in the activity will be left as they currently are. With regard to activation, I have 3 options. I can do so immediately with no time constraint, in which case it will simply run until the next scheduled moment for each of the zones in question. Or I can specify a duration. So I can say I want it to run for a particular length of time. And the third option I have is that I can do a delayed start. So I can still choose a duration, but I can also choose the moment at which it should start. When I do that, it will in fact edit the schedule for the zones in question, so that these switch points will be added later in the day and only kick in then. The concept of a schedule works really well if you tend to do the same thing every week. When I get up in the morning, I care most about the bathroom being warm. Today is Saturday. If you look, tomorrow Sunday, it's going to start heating up at 8:20. Now, let's say I'm getting up either earlier or later tomorrow. That 8:20 will be wrong, so I'll be basically heating the room at the wrong time. In EvoControl, we have something called schedule shifting, which allows me to advance or delay the schedule for as many zones as I care about. And all I have to do is slide this slider in order to do so. Let's look at the underlying concept. It's called segments. And we divide the day up into 4 of them. We have waking up, lunchtime, dinner time, and going to bed. And I get to define 2 bounding times. So anything in my schedule between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. I consider to be waking up. And if I'm going to shift waking up, I want any switch points that fall within these times to be shifted. I can also decide on what zones I care about. So I care about the bathroom indeed, but also the wardrobe. And I don't really care about the others. They can just stay as they are whenever I shift the schedule. So having seen that, let's now look at tomorrow, waking up. We see indeed it starts at 8:20. It got that information from the schedule. Now I can either make it cooler or warmer, or skip over that, or make the duration shorter or longer of that block. But what I want to do is shift it. So let's say I'm not getting up tomorrow at 8:20. I need to get up early to go someplace, and I need to get up an hour earlier than usual. So I go live with this, and sure enough, it will be 60 minutes earlier, so it'll start at 7:20, and I can see that also here on the dashboard tiles. So if I look at my bathroom schedule now, you see that Sunday, it has changed to 7:20. And by the way, it also changed the 7:30, which was an 8:30, because that also fell within the window that I care about when I'm doing a shift on waking up. With Evohome, you get a single schedule slot for every single one of your zones and for hot water. What EvoControl adds to that is 4 slots. So we have here this 20 symbol indicates the live schedule that's currently active on the panel for this particular zone. But I can also save an A, a B, and a C, which can, as you can see in these examples, all look very different to each other. They can have whatever number of switch points you want and whatever times and temperatures suit your need. So let's say I wanted to go live with this schedule. I simply go live, and now that schedule is live on the panel. So this can be very useful for people who have irregular work times, for example, shift workers. You want to switch between day and night schedules. You can easily do so with EvoControl. EvoControl allows you to work with groups of zones, and you can define up to 12 of these yourself. Here is the group editor. I have created 2 of them, upstairs and downstairs, but you could also have east wing or west wing if you have a large property. And once you have defined groups for yourself, they can be very useful. For example, when you're uploading schedules, you get to use groups. So there's my upstairs group, and there's my downstairs group. And they're also useful when I am changing set points. I can here change all of the currently highlighted zones with these buttons. But if I do the use groups paradigm, then I can make changes just to a particular group. So let's say I just want to tweak the upstairs group, make it all a little bit warmer, then I can do that and go live with it. So a very useful paradigm in order to address multiple zones simultaneously. There's a very powerful schedule editor in EvoControl that I get to by clicking on any tile. This gives me a full week's overview of the schedule. And I can click this edit button, and now I have the possibility to edit. These 4 buttons here will act on whatever number of cells are highlighted, and when I start things out, they're all highlighted, but I can click on individual cells if I want to. Let's go back to them all for a moment. Now this will do a minus 10 minutes on everything that's selected, and this will do a minus ½ degree on everything that's selected. Or if I long press on it, the 10 minutes becomes an hour. And if I long press on this, the ½ degree becomes 3 degrees. So I've now edited a whole load of switch points with just a few clicks, which can be very useful. If I want to individually tweak, so I don't want this to be 20, I want this one to actually be 21, I can do that. And I can select whatever number I want to and act similarly. It's also possible if you click on a column name, the name of the day, to select an entire column on or off at a time. And horizontal rows, if I long click on any cell, I select the entire row. And if I long click again, I deselect the entire row. So this is very useful for editing multiple switch points at the same time, where I have complete freedom to select and deselect whatever I want. With regard to new switch points, I have the option here to address multiple days simultaneously. So let's say on weekends, I want to add a switch point at 21:30, and let's make it stand out by making it hot, 27.5 degrees. Boom, there we go, it's there. And if I decided, oh, I didn't want that to be 27.5, I wanted it to be 27, I can just edit it. And now this looks like what I want, so I can either go live with it, or I can save it. For example, I'm going to save it as Schedule C. And now it's not live on the panel, so if I go back to the office, we'll see that that's not the live schedule. but it is there indeed as Schedule C. So a very powerful editor which allows you to change a whole load of switch points. There can be up to 42 of them in a week with just a few simple clicks. Something that you cannot do natively in Evohome that you can do in EvoControl is copy schedules between zones. So here I have a schedule in the living room that I really like, and I'd like to have it in some of my other zones. If I select More here, then there's this Copy to Zone button, and if I select it, I have the possibility to clone it to other zones. So let's say I want to have that in the office and the studio and the bathroom, and you know what, no, not the bathroom, fine, just finish, and now it has been copied to the other zones. If you have a number of zones with overrides, whether they are temporary, like for example the living room here and office, or permanent, like the guest room and wardrobe, in the case of the native TCC app or on your EvoTouch panel, you need to go to each of the zones individually and cancel the overrides manually for each zone individually. In EvoControl, we have a system mode called Reset. And if we select it and then go live with it, it will automatically cancel in the entire system any overrides, whether they're temporary or permanent. We've already seen how useful it is to have a complete week's tabular overview of a schedule, but under this More button we have some options to look at graphical depictions. If I tap this, then I see the schedule as a graph, so it's showing me horizontally the time and vertically the set point, so I can see it's lower, it goes high briefly, it's higher than it is at night, it goes warmer briefly, and then goes back to the night level. And with these buttons on the top right, I can go from day to day. Now it's also possible to compare the A, the B and the C in this manner. So if this looks a bit busy, I have the option to click on the captions and knock out, and this makes it easier to compare the live and in this case the C. And I also have the option to look at this as a stacked bar chart, so I can see that live A and B look very similar except for some small differences in timing, but there's also a temperature difference on the C1. And finally, I have the possibility to look at the delta T for the next 24 hours between the forecasted outside temperature, which is this plot, and the schedule that's currently live in the zone, whereby the delta, or the difference between these two, will indicate how much heat is likely required to go from this external temperature to that internal temperature. So the wider the gap, the more likely that that zone is to call for heat in the period in question. So this is a very useful graphical depiction, which I can also get on the dashboard here for the entire system at one time. And here I can switch from day to day, and I can look at the different presets if I want to. So just another way of looking at the same data, but because some people are very visually oriented, it can be quite useful. We saw earlier how scenes work in EvoControl, and I can create up to 12 of these and browse through them in this view. Let's take this one here, it's called shower time, and I've put 20 minutes in the name, which if I activate it from here will be ignored. But if I want to put a duration on it or a delayed start, then I can do so with this slider. However, there's another view of my scenes, which is here, it's called the LaunchPad. And I can see the scenes here with an icon that I can assign to them. And when I trigger them from here, that 20 minutes, or it can also be, for example, 30M instead of the apostrophe, if you prefer that notation, then when I trigger that, it will actually have the 20 minutes applied. So we can see if I look at the bathroom, it is now set for until 13:16. It's 12:56, so there's my 20 minutes. The same, for example, my living room boost, 60 minutes. It's a delta of 2 degrees, and it's 12:56. This is until 13:56. So I can see that it has indeed been applied. So if I activate from here, then the duration is respected. Now, with regard to the icons, I selected these icons myself. So this is good night, this is watch TV, this is a boost, this is shower time. It's quite useful to be able to select these icons. And I can do so. For example, I don't want to have an office building for working. I want to have a briefcase. Yep, that looks good. So now I have selected that icon. So that's a very useful single spot from which to jump into quickly in order to make changes to the system. If I want to put things back after messing them up, reset will do so for me. And now I can see that those have been cancelled and everything is back. When your system is in heating off mode, all of your zones get a set point of 5 degrees, which is great for frost protection purposes and usually making sure that there will be no heat demand from any of your zones. However, if you want to manually override a zone by turning, for example, the knob on a HR92, that input will be rejected while we're in that system mode. Inputs are only accepted when we're in auto mode. Now, when you first launched EvoControl, 2 activities were created for you called Standby and Standby Permanent. And if I, for example, activate this one, we get 5 degrees as a set point applied to all of my zones, and it's permanent, as in the name. But importantly, the system mode is auto. So this does exactly the same as the heating off mode on your panel does, with the very important difference that if you're in a room where you feel cold and you want to override it, you can do so because the system mode is auto and that input from your TRV's knob will be respected. As we all know, Evohome has a limitation of a maximum of 12 zones on any EvoTouch panel. So people with a large house with more zones or people with multiple properties will tend to have multiple panels or locations. When you connect EvoControl to a Resideo account that has more than one location, this button here will show up to allow you to switch between them. So you can see as I switch back and forth that I get this toast telling me what I've switched to, but also if the toast has disappeared and I'm wondering which of my locations is this, because for example the zone names are similar, then I can click on the little icon at the top and see the name of the location. So up to 4 of these can be accessed under this button. It will sequentially go through them. And I can have one system active in one browser tab. So because this is a web app, if I open multiple tabs, then I can select a different location in each tab, and I can in fact have a complete system overview on my screen at any one time. The information that EvoControl displays to you is retrieved from the Resideo cloud through the API. And there's a certain amount of information provided through that, but not everything that can be known about your system. If you are a smart home enthusiast and you have either Home Assistant or Domotics, and you also have a Resideo HGI80 hardware device or a clone of it, then the application can be configured to talk to that device and get extra information that's not provided through the API. Now I have here a system that is connected through Domotics, and when I look at it, the first thing that strikes me is that the temperatures are not rounded to a ½ degree, but I have full 0.1 degree resolution on them. Another thing you'll notice is that at the top here I have an indicator of the current demand at the boiler level, so it's 100%. And if I look at this, I can see there's a flame symbol here indicating that zone is calling for heat. The opacity of that flame would actually be less if the demand was less than 100%. But if I click here, I can see that indeed at the moment it's a full 100% heat demand from the living room. I also on this screen see the state of the batteries, or in this case it's a mains powered device, so I see a mains cord, and that can be useful information to have in the system overview as well. Now I have a possibility, if I'm using Home Assistant or Domotics, to connect it to my smart gas meter, which I've done here, and then by clicking on that icon on the dashboard I get a plot of my gas usage over the previous 24 hours. So in 24 hours I've used 4.3 cubic meters, and since midnight that's been 2.4. So I can see that I started this morning around 7 o'clock to heat the house, and that's when the gas demand started. So this can be useful for monitoring my gas consumption. And on the topic of graphs, it's also possible, for example, to double click on a zone tile and to see what the actual temperature together with the set point plot and the schedule plot has done in the previous 24 hours. So you can see that the temperature was just under 20 degrees in the bedroom up until basically 10 p.m. where I had a brief little peak of set point increase. It went above the actual, so that caused heat demand, and up we went with temperature, and it cooled off more slowly after the demand was reduced. Now we can actually see here that the yellow is the schedule. If I turn off the set point for a second, you can see that was the width of the schedule. So I expected to need, for this duration, heat input to the system. However, if we look at the set point, we can see that it's narrower because in fact the room heated up more quickly than expected. And what happened was the demand was reduced as Evohome saw the room heating, and therefore I could learn from graphical information like this that there's actually no need for me to set the scheduled increase in set point this wide, because the system itself will reduce the heat input as soon as it sees the room responding. So this type of information can be very useful to glean from graphs of the system. Now I also have here on the weather forecast icon the possibility, if I click on it, to get a plot of the actual outdoor temperature for the previous 24 hours coming from an actual sensor that I have outside in my garden, and that's feeding into Domotics. So this isn't coming from the weather forecast information for the previous 24 hours, but from my actual outdoor sensor. We've already seen that we can configure quite a lot of things in the application, and it would be a shame if any of that were to be lost. So we have on our account dashboard the possibility to create a backup and restore it later if we need to, of an awful lot of things in the configuration. If we click on it and then go to our downloads folder, we'll see there's a JSON file called EvoControl, which has been created for us. Now we can just go and upload that again if we need to, or if we have a code editor like Visual Studio Code, we can take a look at what's in there, and we'll see that our custom icons for the LaunchPad are there, our schedules are here, our scenes, our groups, macros if we're using the skill, the zones that participate in the different blocks for schedule shifting, our display order, AccuWeather ID, basically everything that you configured when you started using the application is here. So you can download this, keep it in a safe place on your Mac or PC, and if you ever accidentally mess something up, then you can upload it back to the cloud and it will become live again in the application for you.